In this video, you're going to learn how to install vinyl siding. In this vinyl siding installation video, we're going to be installing corners, J-channel, starter strip, J-blocks, all of that. So you're going to find all that content in this video, and all I ask from you in return is to smash that like button. It helps promote the video. And if you're new to this channel, my name's Josh. This channel is all about building your own house, saving a ton of money. So be sure to subscribe and ring that bell so you get a notification every time I release a new video. And let's get started. In this video, we will be installing the siding from ground up to the top of this gable end, as well as this straight wall that's connected to that gable end. Because we'll be covering a lot of information in this video, I'm going to put timestamps in the description below and in the comments section at any time you want to jump to a certain section, as in if we want to go jump to the corners, jump to the starter strip, whatever section you need to know, you can just do that without seeing all the other business in the video. So the first thing I want to do is go over the tools you'll need. So some basic tools you'll need are tin snips for cutting the siding, and you'll need a hammer for driving your aluminum nails, and you'll need a tape measure, of course, a chalk line, a pencil for marking, a speed square, and a level. And there's several ways you can cut siding, but for sake of simplicity, I'm just going to cut everything in this video using tin snips. And I'm going to show you some other tools you'll need if you're working up in the air. Some tools you'll need are the following if you're going to be working this gable end especially, is a ladder and a scaffolding system of some kind. Some people use pump jacks, some people use a standard scaffolding system you see here, and I will be using 2x10s for walkboards. The very first step to installing your vinyl siding is you need to install the corners of the wall you're going to be doing. So if we're starting this gable side, we got to put the corners on this side and the other side. And the very important piece to doing the length of these corners is it must overlap the foundation at least a ½ inch. So that way when water goes down your siding, it goes over your foundation and not above your foundation and into the house. So that's very critical. So the first thing we need to do is chalk lines 3 inches away from the corner for this nailing flange to line up with so your corner looks nice and straight. Let's do that first. So right here is the top of the foundation that we want to go at least a ½ inch over. I just wanted to show you that since the camera was pointing down here. But in order to mark that 3-inch mark, I just take a speed square, so that way we come square off the house and mark 3 inches on this side and then 3 inches on this side. And now we do the same thing up by the bird box if you have a bird box. But if you don't have a bird box, it's just at the very top where this wall intersects the bottom of the roof. Okay, so just repeat that step up here. So speed square hooked onto the side, mark 3 inches. And now on this side, do the same. And now what you do, whenever you get your mark placed, just take a small nail. It can be an 8-penny nail, a trim nail, anything of that nature. And you're going to want to tack a nail here. And then just hook your chalk line onto that nail and line it up with the mark you made below it next to the foundation and strike your line. So you should have 2 chalk lines on each side of the corner that look something like this. And the 3-inch mark works for most manufacturers, but check your corner before you chalk your lines to be sure it'll work out. So in most cases, you'll be sliding up to a bird box that you're going to have to cut around to install your corner. So before you cut anything on your corner, be sure to take your corner here, line it up with that chalk line that we made, and then slide it up. And when I say line it up that chalk line we made, the nailing flange right at this edge, here's our 3-inch mark, but up against our bird box where we got to cut around and just make a mark right to the edge of it. And that's going to be our first mark we make. And then the next step, after we got that mark, is we're going to get a measurement from the bottom of this bird box to where it meets the F channel of where the soffit's laying in. So let's get that measurement, and then we're going to put a 7/12 on this corner right here to match the 7/12 on this house that it's meeting into. So our measurement up to that 7/12 is about 6 inches. And then what we need to do is put a 7/12 on this corner. So in order to do that, you're going to need your speed square. just hook it on that end and use the bottom number here and line it up with the 7. So this is our common 712. Go ahead and put a 712 on it. All right, so here's the end that we marked. And if you're wondering how we got that 712, just put your speed square on there and pivot it until your common number is a 7. And if it's a 612 on your roof, just put a 6 and 5. If it's a 5, so on and so forth. So we know this is a 2-inch mark. If you hold your speed square up there, that's where it butt into that bird box. So before we do anything else here, what we need to do is slide it down until our 2-inch mark in this case butts into that 712. And now we know that it was 6 inches down from that. So you just take your regular tape measure, go about 6 inches, and then make a mark here. So there we got 6 inches. And now just use your speed square to scribe your 2-inch line here, just like so. And this takes a little practice as well. And now what we need to do is make our square line, because the bottom side of the soffit is where it intersects on the other side of the roof. Right like that. So now all we gotta do is cut this line out, cut through here and cut our 712. And that's pretty simple to do. So the hard parts out of the way is just getting all those measurements. You simply just cut following that line. And you'll learn that sometimes you gotta cut sections out in order to get your snips in there. So about like this, and then go underneath. All right. And when it's cold out, you may need to resort to using a battery circular saw with a blade turned backwards. So right like that. Again, whatever section you're cutting off that scrap, cut a little V notch out of it to get your snips in. And it will make the process go way easier, because you almost physically can't get your snips into it to cut it if you don't do that. All right, so now as you can see, this is the part that's going to go up around the bird box, and this is going to be the other side that goes on the bottom of the soffit. Let's go get this installed. All right, now we're going to double check to make sure the corner looks good before we start putting nails in it. So line it up with the red chalk line. In this case, it's red, could be blue, whatever you're using. And then slide it up, and if it looks like it's meeting your roof and your bird box well, which in this case it looks good, go ahead and tack a nail into a nailing flange, into the nailing flange to hold it into place. So you want to make sure you nail towards the top of one of those nailing holes. That way it kind of holds it into place, because if you nail it in the middle, it's not going to hold it from sliding down. And same with anything vinyl, don't drive your nails in tight. Should be a little loose. So now that we got the corner secured to where it's going to be sitting permanently, before we nail it off, we need to mark the bottom where the foundation is to get our length. And that's the best way to get it accurately, is just to temporarily put your corner on with one nail, mark your bottom, cut it, then reinstall it. To get the length of our corner, just line it up with your chalk line, and then come down here to where the foundation meets your sill plate. So right here at the top of the foundation, go ahead and make a mark. And now we know we want this corner about 1 inch farther down than that mark. So go ahead and take your speed square or a tape measure. And I'm just going to hold it on a whole number here, which is 7 inches. And then I'm just going to mark 6 inches as our 1 inch. So now we know after we cut this square That's going to be 1 inch below our foundation. Now all we got to do is remove this nail, take the corner down, and cut that bottom off square. So this is the mark of the top of the foundation. That's the 1 inch mark down below it. So to transcribe that to the face of the corner, I just put a speed square, line it up that mark the speed square to the top of the face, then go ahead and just make a square mark to that. And then come on this side and then make a square mark to that line. And now we'll take our snips and go ahead and cut that off. And again, because these snips are a little thicker than what you would like to get in here tight, all you gotta do is cut a section out there and then cut the section on the face the same way. And always cut the V shape out of the scrap piece, of course. And then now just run your snips over that line that we made. Right like that. Go to the other side, do the same thing. Again, straight cut on the nailing flange, cut a V out, and then cut the J-channel piece of the corner. The J-channel like piece of the corner, not actual J-channel. Alright, and this stuff, after you do it a few times, you'll realize it's not too bad. I know watching somebody do it might look difficult, but it really isn't too bad. Cut that line out. And boom. So now we're ready to install this corner permanently. Go ahead and line it up with your chalk line again. You can actually use that same hole that we used to secure it initially to cut the bottom. So I'll place that nail right in there, put it in snug. And again, with anything with vinyl, you don't nail it tight. There still should be some play in it like that. And go ahead every 16 inches or so. Make sure you line up on your chalk line. Go ahead and secure it with a nail. And do this on both sides of the corner. So as you can see, we're nailed off every 16 inches and we are riding that red line that is our chalk line very nicely. And another tip, if you eyeball down the side of your corner, it should look nice and square like this. The reveal of it should look pretty uniform. So that's a way to double check, and look at your bottom to see how square it looks as well, just to make sure your corner is going to look appropriate. So we installed the first corner. The next thing we need to do is go to the other side of the wall, install the next corner, so this whole wall is going to be ready for the next step. And the next step is going to be installing our trims. If you have a meter, you need to install a J-block for that, or if you have any outlets, you need to install those now as well. So after you or your electrician decides where your meter's going, any outlets or any outside lighting that you're going to be using, you're going to have to install what's called a J-block. And all a J-block is a square that has J-channel built onto the side, more or less. So instead of having a block and then putting your own J-channel on, the J-blocks already have that covered for you, which makes it very nice. So after you have that installed, your siding is going to slide right into it like that. It gives you a nice finished look. So just a real quick rundown on how to install it. After you decide where it goes, tack a nail in the top corner or bottom corner and put your level on it, and then set it level, and then palp a nail on the other side, and that's going to hold it level where you need it. And then just nail off around the nailing flange every about 6 inches in this case, and on your outlets it's probably about every 2 inches, and I'll show you an outlet real quick. This is what's called an E-block, and what an E-block is, it's like the J-block, except it has an electrical outlet in the middle of it. And these come with these trims around it, so you must first pop this trim off, install this outer layer first, and you just put a nail in it every 3 inches or so. Each slot's about 3 inches apart, and you level this up as well, just like you would the J-block. And then, unlike the J-block, you have this outside trim you got to replace. And then you're ready to install your siding around it. And now we're going to move on to the next step. So now that we got our corners on, and we got our blocks on for our meter, and we got our electrical outlets on, all that, now it's time to actually get the siding started. So the first thing we need to do that, we need to install what's called starter strip. This can come either plastic or aluminum. this case it's aluminum, and this stuff's universal. It works for all types of siding, whether it's Dutch lap, beaded, whatever style you got. And that goes with this whole video, is the same way you cut and install the beaded siding we're installing is the same way you'd cut Dutch lap and everything. So just so you know. But the theory is here, you don't have to chalk a line or anything if your foundation is level, and your band board here acts as a place you can use to slide your starter strip up to and nail to, and it'll give you a perfect overlap. So if you look here, here's our sill plate, here's our band board, and here's our foundation. If you slide your starter strip up to it and butt to your band board, you can see it overlaps the foundation almost perfectly. So I'm just showing you that in case you check the level and everything works out and you can do that. I've had that in some houses where you don't have to chalk any lines or anything, and it works out great. And in this case it does too, but for the sake of this video I want to show you how to do it if you don't have a band board or a level foundation. So this is something you're going to have to pay close attention to, but if you do, it's real simple. You can just slide this starter strip right up to the bottom of that band board and you're ready to go. But I'm going to show you the other way to do it too. So come over to one side of the wall or the other, go to the corner post here, and then come over here, find the bottom of your foundation. So right here is the bottom of the foundation, and make a little mark on your corner post, and then come up 1.5 inches. And double check your starter strip to make sure 1.5 inches measurement works, because wherever the top of that starter strip is where the top of it's going to be when I nail it. So that's something you need to make sure. If your starter strip's a little different design and it's thinner or wider, you need to accommodate for it that way. But in this case, 1.5 inches works good. So again, find the top of the foundation, come up 1.5 inches, make a mark, and now we're going to put a nail right there. And if you notice, 1.5 inches is at the top of that sill plate. So I have a feeling it was manufactured that way for a reason. So we're going to put a nail there and hook our chalk line to it and go down to the other side of the wall and do the same thing. So let's go ahead and hook it and do that. And I'll snap it in the middle of the wall as well. Now that we got our chalk line on the wall, grab a piece of your starter strip, and this stuff comes in about 10-foot sections, so you might have to get about right in the middle of it because it's kind of long and flimsy. Go ahead and line up to the top of that chalk line and use your roofing nails that are aluminum, 1.25 inches in this case, the same nails that you put the siding on with. And the only difference to nailing this compared to nailing the vinyl is you can nail the aluminum tight because it's underneath the siding, so you wouldn't see it if it was to crinkle or anything like that. All right, and then when you nail this, nail it about every 16 inches or so, about like everything else with the vinyl. All right, and once you nail that off, you got your starter strip ready to go, and now it's time to go ahead and start the siding. Another tip to the starter strip is check that chalk line to make sure it's level, or the band board, whichever method you use, and see if you are setting level, because now is going to be the time to manipulate it if you're not. So right there, that's sitting good. So we're good here, but double check yours in case your foundation's off a little bit. I got it all installed, and I'd like to point out, I like to alternate between the lower slot and the upper slot as I nail this off going across. And as you can see, I got this whole wall ready to go. Before I get started actually installing the siding, I wanted to explain something really important that most people don't think about. Where your siding laps is all going to be dependent on which side of the wall you start on. So for instance, the view you're looking at is coming up to the house from the road, so you're going to be looking down that wall a lot. So you don't want to see any breaks if you can avoid it, or try to limit the amount of breaks you see. So to do that, as you can see behind me, you don't see any breaks in the siding where it overlaps, because I started from the other side of the wall, and as the breaks came across, they overlapped that way, so you don't see any breaks. So I'm going to show you what it looks like from the other side, so that way you know which side of the wall to start on, because that's the same pattern that's going to run up the whole wall. If your view is from the back side looking towards the road, you're going to see all of these breaks. See them? So you'll see that throughout the whole wall, and that's because the overlap started going this way, and you don't want that if you can avoid it from the primary view of your house. Just a little tip, something that only the pros would tell you. So you understand how this stuff interlocks on your starter strip, that's going to be what it looks like at the bottom of the siding. It has kind of a hook shape to it, and here's the starter strip. So as you can see here, the starter strip actually hooks right down into it like so. So that's what we're trying to achieve, that interlock as we go across that first piece. And actually all the other pieces do something similar, except this top of the siding is going to act as a starter strip to hook into. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so we got a full piece of siding as our starter piece, and all we got to do is go ahead and hook it into that starter strip, just like the example I showed you earlier. And then after you get it started, go ahead and slide it down into your corner. Right like so. And you also want to leave about a 1/4 inch gap from the inside of that corner to your siding. It gives you room for expansion and contraction. So go ahead and lock this into place really well. And this first piece doesn't snap in on the starter like it would on regular siding. So you gotta, seems like gotta hold a little more tension up on it as you get it started. So what you need to do is try to hit a stud. But on this first row, most time you have a band board, so you don't have to try to hit a stud, but make sure you space them about every 16 inches on center. These are the nails that we use. They're just 1.25" roofing nails, and they're aluminum so they don't rust. Now I'm going to go down here and show you how to properly set one of these. So about 16 inches away from each nail, and you want to go ahead and just nail it to where there's about a 1/4 inch gap or so. Eighth inch to a 1/4 inch, just as long as the siding is loose and not tight is really the main part. So as you can see here, there is some play, and it's about an 1/8 inch to a 1/4 inch, like I said, every 16 inches on center. So now when it comes down to this next piece, it's going to overlap up to about 1 inch, to about right here. So I'm going to go ahead and install that now. As you can see here, we overlapped about 1 inch. And as you can see here as well, I try not to go past this break just because it seems like a good place to stop. And right here, I always put a nail at the closest nailing tab from the edge. So as you look down through here, we're cleared down to where we're going to have to finish this run. So we're going to get a measurement here, and I'll show you how to get this measurement the easy way. So once we get to the end of a run to where we got to make a cut, all we got to do, take your tape measure, butt it into the corner, measure right up to the piece of siding that we're meeting. And right now we got about 9.5. So from that 9.5, we need to allow a 1/4 for expansion in here. So let's say 9.25, because we got to take off the 1/4 inch and then add 1 inch to that, and that's going to be your length. So we're going to have 10.25 as our length because we want 1 inch overlap onto this other piece of siding. Let's go get it cut. Okay, so make sure you're cutting it off the factory end that's going to be overlapping the other piece. Hook to the end, go ahead and mark the measurement we needed right here. And then all you got to do now is take your speed square, butt it up against the interlocking piece here, or you can also hook it to the bottom like this, either way, to make a square line. And then you just take your 10 snips and just cut right down that line. And that is all there is to it. And this stuff cuts way easier when it's warm than when it's cold. When it's cold, you got to be careful not to crack the siding. So here's our piece. Let's go get it installed. Now that we're up off that starter strip, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to install all the other pieces. It's a little different than that starter strip piece, but all you got to do is hold the piece of siding until you overlap the other piece about 1 inch, and then come up to the locking strip here, and this is where you're going to interlock it. All you got to do is kind of put your fingertips up under the siding and push it until it locks into the other piece that's down below it. So you'll feel it lock into place, and work it all across the whole piece of siding and keep going until the whole piece is locked into place. And after you do a couple pieces, you'll get the hang of the technique. It's not too difficult. Just kind of roll it down and pull up at the same time. So go ahead and get the whole piece locked in. All right, and to double check your work to make sure you're locked into place, it should hang there by itself, and yet it should slide freely like you see there. So there's no resistance. It's interlocked correctly. And now what you need to do is find the stud, because you need to try to hit each stud as you go across here. So the best way to locate the stud is go ahead and hit across the wall until you hear it's solid. So right there, I can tell it's something solid behind there. So now we'll go ahead and see if there is a stud there. And there is. So on this particular brand of siding, this has numbers, or I'm sorry, it has letters going across each nailing slot. So they're 16 on center. So if we know it's the end that we're on here, each end on each slot that's correlated with it is going to be hitting a stud that's 16 on center. Now these don't work on 2 foot on center, they're only for 16 on center. And just so you know, this is CertainTeed brand siding, so they're the ones with the little letters that correlate 16 on center. So I'll show you that up close. And since these are 16 on center, as you can see, let's say the stud was on this E, you would come over here and then hit the next E, because that would be the next stud 16 on center. So that's just a nice quick reference that CertainTeed supplied on this piece of siding, which is very helpful. So I'd highly recommend CertainTeed siding. So I'm just going to do one last reminder of this, but make sure you leave that 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch gap there, because that is very critical to this siding, because you do not want it looking wavy. If you ever nail it, this stuff will expand and contract and cause waviness, so you don't want that. Once you get your siding up high enough to where you're meeting into a window, these are new construction windows. They're going to be the most common type of window you're going to run into. So you need to get what's called undersill trim to lock that piece of siding into to finish up under the window. So the undersill trim looks like this, has a nailing flange. This is the face of it here, and the siding slides right up into that crease. So that ensures that wind doesn't grab the top of it and pull it out. So you definitely need undersill trim. And how you install this stuff is pretty simple. Just cut it to length underneath the window and nail it every 16 inches apart. And after I get this installed and put the piece of siding up in it, I'm going to show you what that looks like. Here's the undersill trim installed, and I wanted to show you when you cut the height, make sure you cut the height of the piece of siding to come up kind of close to the window here, so it goes up tight into that undersill trim. I'm going to show you a little trick using a speed square to mark your rip. So if you got a rip down the window, this is 2.5 that we need here. So all you got to do, put it up tight close to on the bottom of the siding, hold your pencil at 2.5 and just slide it up the siding, and that's going to make you a nice line to rip the piece of siding down to go under the window. All right, I'm going to show you how to install this into that undersill. Now they make a tool called a snap lock tool, and it'll put snaps, little rivets across the top of this piece, so when you slide it into the undersill trim, it gets locked into place. But I never use that, and I'll be honest, I never had a piece of siding come out from the undersill trim. So that's up to you, and if you use it, I'd say it's definitely probably best practice, but I don't, and I've never had a piece come out, just FYI. So what you gotta do is snap this into the siding below it and slide it into that undersill trim at the same time. Let's go ahead and do that. Takes a little finessing, but go ahead and slide it up into that trim, and at the same time, lock it into place. So that's what it's going to look like underneath the window. It's going to be a nice clean looking finish. And then on the corners, you'll see you leave about a 1/4 inch gap from the window and the siding. So when it's slid back in there, you need to leave a little bit of a gap. So the same process, you leave a 1/4 inch gap around it, but with this E-block, it has its own trim. All you gotta do is slide that back over it and lock it into place. And that's gonna give you a nice clean finish and a nice trim to end your E-block installation. To install a J-block for a light mount, it's the same process as the E-block, except you put a piece of wood behind it to add stability in a place to anchor your light, but it still has this trim that you place around it, and you leave a 1/4 inch gap when you cut around it as well. Thought I'd show you that in case you have a light to install.